welcome everybody. Wow, we are really low on participation. I think it's interiors. I don't know. Anyway, so first of all, I want to comment that the test went, I mean, some people did really great, and some people struggled a little bit more than I was hoping. It seemed like the sets, questions were very, you either got it or you didn't. There was very little in between those sets of questions. But most people got them, and I'm guessing that the worksheet was helpful enough to help you understand how to do the sets of questions. The two questions that were the most challenging, and you're probably not surprised, are creating a class and then creating objects from the class and calling methods using those objects. So you will see an example very similar to that on the final exam. So if that was something that you got, great, don't forget it. If that's something that you felt like you struggled with, let's work on that to make sure that on that final exam, you can get every one of those points, okay? And if you need my help, if you need the TA's help, make sure you get it so that you can create a class correctly and that you can then call them, create an object and call them methods. The other one was dictionaries. And that is, once again, creating an empty dictionary, putting values into the dictionary. The most common problem I saw is that in my description, I said, you're reading an emails and names. One of those is a key. Which one should be the key? I said names and emails, and everybody put names as the key. This is like the first word in what I wrote. But if our names unique, our keys supposed to be unique, email should be unique. Think about that. So that was the number one big thing that people got. People forgot how to put an element into the dictionary. You need to refresh on that, and I'll refresh on that when we do a review. The last thing, I didn't even ask you to do anything. I just asked you to put things in and then move through all the elements. And to move through all of them, you should use one of the methods, the keys, the values, or the items. And items is the most flexible one. That's the best one for you to use if you're not certain. Because it will give you both the key and the value. And you can return whatever it is, print out whichever you want. The only difference is on the final, I also might ask you to delete something. So that to show that you really know how to create a dictionary, add elements to the dictionary, look through all the elements in the dictionary, and delete them. Or make a change to something. Show that you can find a specific thing and then review it. So those are the big things there. So when I'm looking over the schedule, today we're going to be talking about comprehensions and generators. Those are new, but if you understand loops, these are not going to be helpful at all. Okay, so we're going to spend all day today looking primarily at list comprehensions and generators. There is a homework assignment related to this. Okay, so you're going to want to go out and look at that. This should not be a super hard homework assignment. But there is a few things in it that might require you to do a little looking up things. I explain it, but you should go. After this class, if you don't know how to do something in Python, you're going to have to go figure out how to do it. And I would say python.org, the documentation that they've got, and there will be one of your primary resources. So you need to be able to kind of help yourself as well. And this is like I said, I gave you all the code, I give you code, it basically works. I want you to understand it, and I want you to change it, is really what it's about. So you need to understand it well enough to make a change, which is really going to be a pretty common task for you when you graduate. Next week, we talk about getting data from other sources. That is an in-person meet. I'm kind of expecting it to be in person, although I'll be making recording just a minute once we actually start the slideshows. These announcements are for everybody to show up to class. And then there will be a homework assignment for there too. The week after that, I have regular inspections. I have that as an online week, because we haven't really had very many online weeks. And now, the online weeks, the new policy for online is I was supposed to record a video and post it, and you watch it whenever you want to. The kind of the way I've done it for some other classes is, I'm gonna record the video at Thursday at 4 o'clock, and if you want to join, I'll send out the Zoom link. You don't have to join. I'll post the session after we're done, but if you'd like to join, what joining allows you to do is ask questions and get clarifications. You are welcome to join, but I can't require you to join during that time. So, and then we'll have that one be online. The week after that, we've got parallel computing, modules, and testing. Parallel computing, you don't have to be too afraid about, because you don't actually have to write code. You have to understand some of the main parallel concepts. And you get extra credit for showing up for class and doing the hands-on activity for parallel computing. Once again, you don't have to code. That's all I can tell you. I don't want to spoil this class. So there's a couple things you're going to do for hands-on activities. And then, of course, modules and testing. We're going to talk to you a little bit about unit testing, because you do need to have an understanding of what that is in case you ever need to do that on the job. And then it's Thanksgiving, and then it's the final exam. Okay, so we don't have a whole lot of time left. Okay, any questions on the schedule? Any questions on what's coming up? Any other questions just in general that I can answer before we get started on today's test? All right. Well, let me get the recording started. Okay, so today's topic is list comprehensions and generators. I'm going to tell you, I taught a student in a previous class. He was working, I think he was working at NASA. Okay. And he was in the IT department there. And he had had this subject, and next week he's telling me about his problems he's having at work, and how he has to go through all these log files, and how it's just taking so long that he's running out of time to get the task done. And I said, why did you use a generator? And we just learned about that last week. He goes, yeah. So he comes back to next week, he goes, I used a generator, and where I was running out of time before, it got done in 3 minutes. And so it helped him complete his task because he was able to use it. So both these are useful. The list comprehensions, I'm going to say just they're the most useful because so many people use them. And you have to basically be able to understand what, if you see it, what's happening, you need to understand what's going on. But I also think that many of you will find it advantageous to learn how to write them. Because for some people, these are easier, for whatever reason. It just makes more sense to them. So we're going to talk about each of those. So first of all, basically the point, let's see. I'm sorry, I need to go away to the size about right clicking and clicking next one. Okay, so creating, the whole idea behind a list comprehension is it allows you a very compact way of creating new lists from existing ones. So if you already have a list of data, and maybe you want a new list that only contains parts of this data, or maybe you want a new list that takes all the data in this list and modifies it, such as, nowadays, everybody would love to see a list of salaries, and then us giving everybody a 5% increase or something like that, so I apply, an additional 5% on top of everybody's salary in this list. So we want to make changes to every single one. So those are some examples, but the idea is you've already got a list. Lists are probably one of the most common ways to store information in a program, so being able to reuse those, repurpose those, is going to be really useful. So in order to create a new list, if I'm using a for loop, the first thing I have to do is create an empty list. And then I have to loop through some sort of interval. That would mean an existing list, all the letters in a document, all each character in a document, it could be every element in a tuple, anything that's got multiple elements. Okay, so most of the time it's going to be a list. And what we're going to do is we're going to loop through one of those or a range, in other words, we don't have to loop through all of them, we can just loop through a subset, for instance. And then we're going to append each element to the end of the list. So if I have double, I might start with something like that, where I created an empty list. And then I say for n range 5, what I'm going to do is take each one of those values, that will be 0, and then 1, and then 2, and then 3, and 4. I'm going to multiply it times 2, or double it. And I'm going to append it, which adds it to the end of the list double. Okay? And when I print double, I get the values 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. So this isn't terribly hard to do. You see that you were able to accomplish this in about 2 minutes. Okay, but we can do that with one line, make it much more compact with using list comprehensions, and that's what we're going to learn how to do. Now, there are 3 types of comprehensions. There are list comprehensions. That means we're making a list. We're making a new list out of an existing list. There are dictionary comprehensions, which means we're making a new dictionary, generally out of existing dictionaries or maybe out of a list. And then there are set comprehensions. We're going to primarily focus on list comprehensions. You can just wrap your head around those. I'll be happy. Okay, and then the last thing we're going to talk about are generated comprehensions. Now, here is a list comprehension. I color coded this. I don't know if everybody can see all these colors well, but I know some people are colorblind, and I'm expecting you to tell me. But what I tried to color code it to help make it better stand out for people. Now, for me, when I look at a list comprehension, you notice it's a list comprehension because it begins and ends with the square braces. Those are the symbols to create a list, correct? Then, the first thing I do is look at the number. I look at order. For I in old list. This is just, it's grabbing each element in the old list, right? So I is just a variable, and it's going to grab each element in this old list one at a time and put it into I. So first we look at the orange. Then we look at the green. If filter I. So in other words, what this means is I might have a check, and I only might want to accept some of those odds. Like maybe I only want to accept the even numbers or the odd numbers, or the numbers that are greater than 0 or greater than 100. There's some sort of filter that's going on. And I'm only going to keep the ones that pass this filter. And then I go expression select. Basically, this is what gets put into the new list. Okay, and that's only putting the ones, if it passes the filter, it goes into this expression and it does whatever this does. Let's look at an example. So for I in range 30, this range 30 is going to produce values from 0 until 29. If I mod 3 is equal to 0, in other words, if that number is evenly divisible by 3, then I'm going to do this expression, which is just put that number that was evenly divisible by 3, into the new list. So multiples, which is my new list, has got the values 0, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 22, 27. You see that? So I start in the middle to look at that folder. Where's this folder? Then I look to see if the filter. The filter is optional. The for loop is required. The filter is optional. You don't always see a filter because you might want to just accept everything. And then this expression is required. You need to know what it is I'm putting into the list. In this example, I'm putting I. If I pass into the filter, I'm putting I into the list. Okay. So we use list combinations in part because they're very, very flexible. It's just the standard creation of a list. And if we can do something called mapping. Now what mapping does, there are actual functions that are called mapping functions. There are methods that are called mapping methods. And what they do is they apply, it's like they apply a little program. They apply a function to an individual element in the list. So it's like you're taking every element in that list, and you're going to apply a function to that element, each and every element before you put it into the new list. Now we'll do some of that today. Like maybe that function is calculate the tax. Maybe that function is determine if there is a shipping on this. Maybe that function is to determine whether somebody has to pay an assessment or something like that. So basically what mapping means is we apply a function to each element in the list. Filtering means that we can exclude some of the values. We can put a test on it so that not all values are accepted. Some of them won't filtered out. It's also very declarative. It's very easy to really understand. Once you know how to read these, I think you'll be challenged to do it. You just know how to do it. Like writing pencil. If you don't use it for a while, once you see it again, you'll remember exactly. And they're also faster than standard loops. So when you get some speed advantage, they're also very dynamic. It's a very simple, powerful tool to use in a wide range of situations. Now, look at this little example. Now, I don't have this color coded for you, but where did we start? 4x in A and C. What is this doing? It's going to read each of these characters one at a time and put it into X. Is there a filter? There's no filter. So basically, X would first take on A, and then it's going to put it through this process before it puts it into the new list. What does this do? It's going to basically make it lowercase. And so ultimately, this will create a new list that is all lowercase letters. Now, I didn't assign it to a variable. Because I didn't assign it to a variable right here, this is not saved. But it's still showing you how this computation works. Same thing, I'm taking lowercase letters from letter and making all uppercase letters. And then making new list with all uppercase letters. Now, here I'm going to create a list of, it's called two tuples. So I'm going to create, this is the expression. So for x in range 6, I start looking at there. That's going to return the values 0 to 5. For each value x, notice the red parentheses being that tuple. I'm going to put each element in my new list as a new tuple, and that tuple is going to be the value of x, and then that value of x squared. So now I'm going to make a list of just like this. So I've got each element is a tuple. Here I'm going to extract all the numbers from the string. So here I've got a string that says identify ID 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So for x in string, for x in string. So it's going to grab each letter one at a time. That's what this one does. And then if x is a digit, so only if it's a digit am I going to put it into numbers. This way it's an easy way of getting rid of anything that's not a number. Okay, so because of that is digit, I'm just going to get a list, not a list of numbers. You get a list of numbers. I can join all those together and make it 1, 2, 3, 4 at all. But it's a list of numbers. I can get all the positive numbers. Here I've got a list of numbers. I can say for n in num, so we're going to grab one number at a time. If n, whatever n is greater than 0, then include that in my new list called posnum. So when I print posnum, I just get 1, 2, and 3. Now, if I wanted to just do for loop, okay, so what I'd like you to do is write a list comprehension that creates the following list A. You see that? Yes. You do. I just made that to come up, which is a 2. So yeah, I'll have to. Actually, those videos are the slides, I just combine other slides that are. It's just that they're hard to do. So I'll combine them. Okay, so you see this. This is so it doesn't no. Okay, so you see A is equal to 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64. Are you seeing the pattern? About 1 squared, 2 squared, 3 squared, 4 squared, 5 squared. You see that? Can you write a list combination that makes A? I'll give you a couple minutes to start. So I have to start with A, with the list I'm making is assigned, and then put my 2 square brackets in there to make sure I don't forget that I made square brackets. Okay, and then space over a couple, because I want to write my for loop first. For num in range, where do I want to start? 1. Where do I want to end? 11. So I want to get 10 because I want 10 squared is 100, I want 10. So I'll go up to 11. I'm going to use the default value of 1. So there's my for loop. Do I want to filter any of them out? No, I want to take all of them. What is the value that I want to do? Remove this and keep that up here. Num squared. Okay. Now that you have that list, you don't have to type it in. Write a comprehension that takes this list and makes a new list that contains only the numbers greater than 50. I'm gonna go back to here, so you can remember that, this expression right here, how to create a list. I want you to take that list that we just created, and I want you to use that list and only create a list with the numbers that are greater than 50. Okay. The way you can do that is you can say, we call bigger than 50. This, I want to go through every number in A. Now, I need a filter, because I only want to keep the numbers that are bigger than 50. If n is greater than 50, put n in the list. Um, So I only have 64, 81, and 100 in that new list. Same list, we're using A again. Write a list comprehension that takes this list and makes a new list that contains only the odd elements in it. Do you remember that first one where I included only the numbers that were even divisible by 3? So we use something similar to that to figure out if it's an odd number. way you can do that is you could say, for num in A, if num mod is equal to 1, or I guess not equal to 0, so it's equal to 1, then that's an odd number. And I want to include num in my list called odds, or odd. So I get 1, 9, 25, 29, and 81. Those are the odd numbers. Okay, you can also use list comprehensions to work with text files. So I can, like in this case here, I can open up a text file, and then I can say for I, that's usually like reading one line, I is a line, in a file, if line 3 is in that. So I'm looking for a specific string, or I'm looking for something specific in that line of that text file. Okay, so for instance, if I open text database, I don't know I have that. Let's see. I open. I do not, so I'm going to have to go out and grab it off Canvas. And I'll show you where you can grab it as well. And this out of the way. And go out of Canvas. Back when we talked about files, one of the files is called Texas Ratings. There it is. So you can, there it is. Click here and download it. In the folder, I myself want to put it down in my C test data. That's where I like to keep it. Oh, I don't know what I can do now. Okay. Let's go here, file. Open. See. I want to find test tables. There it is. Okay, so I got it in my test table folder, so you know where to get it as well. What it is, just so that you are aware. You need to update this, but it's good enough for now. This is, that is not good. That is not good at all. Let's try that again. Good thing like that.